Hey lads, welcome to another commentary video. This time we are in Halls of Valor, and the footage is going to be from a +20 Fortified explosive dungeon. So the bosses here could be a bit challenging to heal, at least some of them, but I'm also planning to do separate videos with guides on how to heal every single boss, so stay tuned for that. I'll try to get Tyrannical footage from that. Alright, so let's go through the dungeon now. The first pull that we do usually on 45 weeks is just those two groups, but you can actually pull everything on a Tyrannical week or in a lower key. The Thundercaller is the mob to watch for here because he does that Thunderbolt cast that you want to interrupt. And the other thing that just happened to my druid, as you saw, he got targeted by the Thundercaller, gets a debuff and then a dot in a few seconds. You can dispel this dot, so just watch for that because on Fortified it ticks very hard, so you don't want to let a person to roll to that. Next, we have the same pool, but there's also a dragon. What the dragon does is he has a frontal, so watch the tank. And also, he does those swirling tornadoes that basically you need to avoid. So it's just a little extra. Lightning Breath is the name of the frontal. It's just a little extra to watch for. On all of these pools, you should be paying close attention to your tank's health because the champions actually do that power attack, which is a tank buster. So you need to be careful for him not to drop too low. Especially on Fortified keys, you can actually have some tanks die if they're not very careful. So watch your feet, dispel the Thundering Bolt debuff, and then spot heal if people get hit, of course. Clear Thundering, that's clear, and make sure to interrupt the Thundercaller. It's a little bit more scary if you do all of these in one pool because there's more to interrupt, and you can also stun everything but the dragon, so keep that in mind. You can help with CC and you can help keep your tank alive. Next we have Hymdall, which is the first boss. This boss, as somebody actually said in the comments on my YouTube channel, it's not really a boss, it's just a mob with a lot of health. But you do have to pay attention in this fight because you could actually die. So the first thing that happens is he does the Horns of Valor. That's a lot of damage, but you don't need to heal that immediately because there's no other damage coming shortly after that. So focus on your tank, and then the other thing that you need to focus is there's going to be those drakes coming from the sides, and they will just lightning breath the platforms. So when he does the Horn of Valor, the drakes will be coming shortly after. Watch both sides because you don't know which side the drakes are going to be coming from. And if you see that the drake is coming in the platform that you're staying on, the platform is divided on 3 parts, move to another section. And after the breath is over, then move back and you're safe. If the drake is on another platform, just assuming you're staying in the middle, just wait for the lightning breath to cast and then go to that place and you'll be safe. The other thing to dodge here is those spinning slords on the ground. I mean, just move out of them and then you're fine. And after the drakes do the breath, you see those tornadoes, which are also very easy to dodge. I guess the only thing that could happen is if he does the Horn of Valor and then somebody runs in tornado. But obviously, that's a very specific case. And you can also have some healings rolling, like Healing Stream Totem, and then put some Riptides on the people that are low. And the rest of the time, as you can see, I'm just DPSing. There's no real need to use cooldowns on this fight, which means that you can use all the cooldowns that you like on the trash before that, and then just chill on the boss. And of course, watch your tank, but generally, it's a pretty easy fight. Alright, next, there's this patrol, the Sentinel, which makes the mob immune to interrupts and stuns. So what you want to do is go on the right-hand side here, but if you have the patrol being on the right, then you can go left. It's not the end of the world. There's just one more mob to interrupt over there. Now, what you need to watch for here is first the Mystics. The Mystics will do a Radiance cast, which is going to heal all the mobs around them. Holy Radiance is the name of the spell, so you need to interrupt that, right? You cannot just have one of those go off, because it will just make the pool significantly harder. In this case, we have a double pool, so we have 2 of these going. You have to be extra careful not to let one of those casts go off. And they also have the Rune of Healing. So this is just a spot on the ground, which will heal the mobs if they stay on top of that. But it's not Shattered Rune, I think his name. It's not crucial to interrupt that, because the tank can just move the mobs away and they will not heal. The Mortal Hue that you just saw the Shield Maiden cast is actually a frontal, and be prepared to heal your melee. If they're not careful, they can get hit, and in hierarchies it will also... Oh, it could one-shot them, right, if the key is high enough. It's not only a frontal, but it is also putting a debuff on them, which reduces the amount of healing taken, so it makes it even harder to basically come back from somebody being hit with that. So another pool with a Mystic and a Thunder color. There's one more mob that I didn't talk about. I'll talk about that in a second. But the Shield Maidens also do another thing, which is this debuff that my tank has on top of the frontal. They also do a reduced armor debuff. So if you pull a few of those, it could be very scary, because these debuff stack. So if the tank eats 2 frontals, one frontal is 20% reduced healing, 2 frontals is 40%, and you can see how this escalates, right? And then the reduced armor debuff also stacks. So if you pull many of these mobs, forget about your melee. If they eat a frontal, they're dead, right? But your tank might be in a big trouble. Now, once you kill all the casting mobs, you can pull the Sentinel on top of everything else. Some people entirely skip the Sentinel, but it's not the end of the day to pull it. So this mob is pretty easy. It has this big circle that you need to run out from, and then he does that frontal, which you need to move away from. Other than that, it's just tank and spank. The problem here is if you have mobs that cast around it, you cannot stun or CC them. I didn't mention that, but apart from this mob, every other mob is actually stunnable, so you can use your cap totem, and you can even use hacks to heal something if to interrupt something, sorry, if that's needed. My warrior didn't get out of the circle. Obviously, that's a one-shot, right? So nothing you can do here to save them. But that's that. Let me see what the tank is going to pull next. Alright, so we're pulling a Mystic and another Shield Maiden and a Champion. So all of these mobs we have seen before. There's the Holy Radiance. Make sure to interrupt. Help your group, especially on a bigger pulls. And this week is just killing orbs. As you can see, we let the Rune of Healing go off here, but that's fine, because we just move the mobs away, and my rogue eats a frontal, I think, and dies again. So as I said, if they don't die, you have hard time keeping them up and healing them up, but other than that, just hope that they're competent enough not to get hit. There's a Rune Carver mob in this pool, and there's few of these going on. The Rune Carver is going to do an edge cast. It's going on right now. I just interrupted it. This is actually a cast that turns into a channel if it's successful, and it targets one person on Fortified weeks. In few ticks, it will just kill the person. So it's very important to interrupt that. As you can see, it's going on right now. It went on my druid, but we were quick enough to interrupt it, so he didn't die. And obviously, that won't be the case if you are slow enough to interrupt that. That mob is also stunnable, so feel free to interrupt that. Here, another tick goes off, but the interrupt is quick enough for nobody to die. And then the other mob on the back is called a Petrifier. He does those Cleansing Flames casts, which are quite frequent. Now, it's not crucial to interrupt them, but if they go off, he starts channeling spots on the ground that you need to avoid. So this just makes the fight harder. If you have a spare interrupt, you can definitely interrupt them. If not, it's not the end of the world, as I mentioned. There's gonna be a few more of those mobs going forward, right? But I think we didn't only talk about one type of mob that I'll mention later. Everything else we have seen so far, at least in this area. Now, on the right hand side of the screen, there is 2 more sentinels that lead to the last bosses. You can skip those, but you need to make extra trash on some of the other areas in the dungeon, so keep that in mind. I think this is what we do in this one, but it's also not the end of the world to kill them. Just run out of the circles and the frontals, of course, but they have a lot of HP, so we just decided there's more optimal ways to get a dress percentage here. Other than that, they're not very scary, so don't be afraid to pull them. Alright, so there's different combinations. As you can see, we have the Shield Maiden here with the Fronto. We have a Runecarver casting the Edge and a Thundercaller casting the Bolt. And of course, there could be Mystics in the mix. So be prepared for all of those combinations. All those groups have different combinations. So if there's a Thundercaller, you need to Dispel. You always need to Interrupt, pretty much. Try to use your Cap Totem effectively here. Help your group. And you should be totally fine. Now, these pulls, usually you do them 1 or 2 at a time, depending on the difficulty and the amount of the interrupts you have to do. But once you go to Hyrja room, which is this place over here, things can actually get scary for your tank. So he's going to pull now all those 4 Shield Maidens, and there's also a Purifier at the top. So your job here is basically help to interrupt the Purifier, so nobody gets hit by a spot on the ground, and be prepared to pump your tank, because there's 4 Shield Maidens, which means that he's going to have significantly reduced armor, and he's going to eat some Frontos, and that means that he'll be taking less healing from your spells. Now, there's 2 more Shield Maidens in the next pool, and some people are crazy enough to pull all of these groups at the same time, but then your tank really needs to know what he's doing, because he might even get into a situation where you cannot save him, right? It might be entirely up to him. So in a pug, I would definitely recommend go with a smaller pools here, so you can actually keep your tank alive. Be prepared to drop your Spirit Link Totem if he gets really low, because as I said, just pumping heals into him might not be enough if he gets enough of the debuffs. Alright, next we have a mini-boss with 2 Shield Maidens, and the mini-boss has 2 mechanics. The Blast of Light is a Fronto, so definitely dodge that, because that one-shots. And then the other thing that he does is he's going to target a person and then jump on them with that Valkyrian spell that he just cast. However, this you can line of sight. So I think he's going to cast the spell on me next. You get a white circle around you when he does that. There we go. But you can just run down the stairs and line of sight it. You want to do that for 2 reasons. First, if he jumps on you, he's going to do a significant amount of damage. He's not going to kill you, but then you have to heal through that, and your tank still has the debuffs that you have to deal with. And also, he's going to move out of the melee, so they'll get less uptime. So line of sighting this is always a good idea. Just dodge the frontal then that he casts on the tank, and you'll be totally fine. Alright. 2 more mini-bosses before we pull Hyrja. Soul Stain is the scary mob, especially on Tyrannical week, because it does a lot of damage. So he does the dome here. Make sure you're inside, because you take reduced damage in there. And once the channel starts, you will be taking a lot of damage, especially on Tyrannical weeks. So your job here is basically to keep everyone alive. It could be really hard. This is a healing check, because on top of the dome, he also casts Arc Lightning, which is just something like a chain lightning that hits a few people, which makes it even harder. So here's another dome. Make sure, of course, you're in the dome. And that's pretty much it. Like, it's very hard to heal. You need to have cooldowns, and I'll talk about that more probably in a separate video. You can pull that mob, and once you are in the shield, you can pull the second mini-boss that we're killing right now on top of him. This means that you will be avoiding the overlap of the mechanics, and you can fight both of the mobs at the same time. This mob, as you see, it has an interrupt, and then he does those orbs that go away from him. You have to dodge those. If you're lucky enough and you stay in the distance, you can dodge the first orb, go behind it, and then you might not have to move at all for the rest of the mobs. It's a little bit harder for melee, of course, but in this case, we're playing ranged. So dodge those orbs, very important, because they one-shot on hierarchies. And now we pull the boss, which is basically a mix of the 2 mechanics. So if you pull it to one of the sides, you get the mechanics from the mini-boss that you saw. But the longer the boss stays on that side, he gets above, that does more damage. So the mechanics on this side do more damage. So as you can see, we're in the first dome right now. This is a Fortified week. We lost it, so the boss is going to melt very quickly. But you need to be prepared to last 3 or even 4 times in that dome to heal through that dome. Now, after we do one of the big mechanics, the dome or the orbs on the other side, he does a fronto, so make sure you're not standing in front of the tank, and be prepared to heal your tank because that fronto hits a lot. Now, before the Sanctify or during the Sanctify, as you can see, he targets a person and puts a light ring around them. So make sure to heal them once that expires and stay out of the ring. Then dodge the orbs, another fronto, and the fronto usually is used by the tank, so he's sent over to the other side. You want to switch at every big mechanic, right? So one Sanctify, one Dome, so that the boss doesn't get too much damage, too much buff to its damage on the specific side. The other thing that I can advise you here is try to precast Healing Rain inside of the dome, and then run into the dome and even precast your chain heals before the channel starts off, and then keep casting spells because it's a lot of damage, even on, especially on Tyrannical weeks. Don't be afraid, like you need to use your cooldowns here, so save Ascenders for one of the shields, save Ancestral Guidance for another, and then you can have Spirit Link and Healing Tide Totem as well. Now, the boss is almost dead, so the tank didn't move him to the other side, but that's something that I'm not advising you to do because it's very hard to survive two shields consecutive without going to the other side, because if you move the boss to the other side, he loses the debuffs that he got on the previous side. So if you keep him for two consecutive casts on the same side, then you're in a big trouble because he'll be doing 200% increased damage. And here we have the Marksman, which is basically the only mob that we haven't talked about yet. There was one in the previous pools, but I ignored it at that point. So penalizing shot, I think, was the name of the, what he did. This is actually a fronto, so he'll just jump on a certain location and cast that to your tank. So make sure you're out of the projectiles path so you don't get hit. He just did that if you see it at the bottom of your screen. But other than that, this mob just, it's a bit annoying because it jumps out from the rest of the mobs, jumps out of the group, so you have to chase him and kill him. But other than that, as long as you avoid the fronto, you should be totally fine. Alright, so after you kill all of these, you go through this portal and you go into the Fenryr area, which is the third boss. Some groups might do Fenryr first and Hyrja second. It all depends on your lust cooldowns, etc. I think we rushed through this area specifically this time, but sometimes you might actually have lust back for Fenryr, and you might actually need that on Tyrannical weeks. So once you go through here, there's this Drake. You can actually skip this Drake if you're quick enough, but in this case, we're just killing it. So Lightning Breath is the fronto, and then dodge the tornadoes that he's just going to turn and cast on a certain player. You want to keep him away from the little goats, the little deers, because if he eats them, he empowers himself. Some people actually intentionally let him eat a few because they're actually extra percentage, but it's a very small percentage of trash, so it's probably not going to make a big difference in your run if you actually let him eat few of those mobs, because they're not elites, right? So their percentage is very, very low. Now, in some pools, some tanks might pull some of the bulls that you see on the left-hand side. They just have a tank buster and a AoE on the ground that you need to move from. So just be prepared if that happens, right? They hit the tank very hard. We opt to do something else, and we pull the Fenryr now, which is the first phase of the boss. This is not the scary part. So let's go through some of the mechanics here. You need to get him to 60% to actually go into the next phase, but you don't fight him immediately. That's important. Now, the howl that he just did, you need to not be casting while that happens, because obviously you get interrupted. The Ravenous Leap was something that he did beforehand, so he'll just charge at few people and leave a nasty debuff on them, which basically ticks down for 30 seconds. It's a nasty dot. And then that big red circle that you saw is actually a soak. So here's the Ravenous Leap. What you want to do on the leap is you want to spread, because if he charges somebody and then passes through you, you get a charge, and then if he hits you again, you get an extra stack of the dot. I got locked here because I was casting, right? This is one thing to watch for, but generally you don't want to get more than one stack of the dot because that hurts a lot. And I will talk about the soak mechanic and the extra mechanic that he gets in just a moment when we pull the next, the real fight, the real Fenryr. Now, before Fenryr, there's those little wolves that you have to pull. You can also skip those if you know how to do that. They could be very annoying, especially in Fortified weeks, because as you can see, they charge people. And the more wolves you have in your vicinity, they basically empower themselves, the more damage they do. So that's why we didn't pull that into the next pack, because the charges would be doing significantly more damage. We're killing these two first and then pulling the next three. If you get unlucky and you get charged by all three at this point, even on this key, you're dead, right? That's why I don't like the spool, and that's why you need to be prepared to very quickly top people off, because you don't know who they're going to charge next. Hope to get lucky. Those are actually stunnable. As you can see, I just war stomped them, so you can try to reduce the amount of charges by just CCing the mobs. And then, of course, be prepared to heal a lot here. Spot heal, because it's not AoE heal, but as I said, you have to be prepared to top people off quickly, so somebody doesn't die to multiple charges and getting unlucky. Alright, so we pull the boss now. Make sure you have mana, because there's a lot of healing to be done here. And so I think he is doing the interrupt right now, and then he usually does the ravenous leap, which is the spread mechanic. So here we go, we spread. He will charge a few of us. Nobody got 2 stacks, which is nice. And then after that happens, so you spread, after that happens, you want to actually go for the Claw Frenzy next to the boss, because you want to soak. The less people you have, the more damage they take, and they could actually die. So this is a huge hit that you need to basically heal through very quickly, and often he's going to do few of those subsequently, right? So make sure to be prepared and to use cooldowns for these points. The Ravenous Leaps are not going to kill people, but they leave the debuff, which makes it harder to heal people in the Claw Frenzy, which just happened. So save the cooldowns for that. Make sure you don't get interrupted. There's few ads that come along. You need to AoE down once that happens. And the other mechanic is Scent of Blood. Now, the first one we bopped, so the person was fine. He just stayed in the fight. But if he targets you, and he can actually target the healer as well, you need to run away from him. If he gets you during the Scent of Blood, you're dead. You can also run in the cave that is behind us, if you didn't kill the wolves especially, right? But other than that, it's just rinse and repeat. So spread for the Ravenous Leap, don't get interrupted, then get in for the Claw Frenzy. Everybody needs to soak that, especially on Tyrannical keys. And if you get targeted by the Scent of Blood, run away until that's over, and then be sure to run back in quickly, because obviously you can have a Claw Frenzy coming up right next after that. And the other thing to mention for this boss, if the person who runs away has stacks from the Ravenous Leap, make sure to heal them, but they nerfed that boss, so they shouldn't have more than 1 stack anyway, so not so scary. Now, the Grizzlies that we pulled is actually the compensation for not pulling the boost on the other side. So they actually do a stacking debuff on your tank. He's going to have this bleed, and he's going to take more and more damage. So what the tank is probably going to do here, as you can see, we're trying to stun them and slow the bears so he can reset his debuff. As you can see, right now, he has 5 stacks of the debuff, so he's taking more and more increased damage, but I think he managed to reset him here, right? Yeah, but this is stacking, so obviously it could get very, very scary if you let many of these stack. I think the bears also have a frontal. This is the explanation for my melee dying here. So they need to be careful as well. And also, this is not a pull that you will do on every group. As I said, some groups just opt to kill the sentinels before the last bosses and the bulls on the other side. But generally, the bears are a bit more scary. I'm not sure why the tank decided to pull them in this run, but it is what it is, right? We just heal through whatever they throw our way. So after you kill Fenryr and Hyrja, you go back to the room where we came from, and you can actually move to the next boss area. Now, if you kill the sentinels, obviously, That's one of the options. The other option is we just shroud and we skip them. Once you get close to the door opens, and if you saw, the tank actually took one of the beers that stays on the tables around us. Now, the idea of the beers is we have to do 4 mini bosses before we actually engage King Skovald, which is the next boss. And you fight those mini bosses one by one, at least the first 2, and then you pull the last 2 together. If you get a beer, you can actually activate one of those mini bosses early, so that basically you save time and you cleave to 2 of them. The way you do that is, so you have to talk to any of these to activate them. You throw the beer to one of them. The tank is going to do that. So as you can see, he threw the beer to the mob on the left. Then he activated the one on the right. King Hymdall is the name. And then you drag that mob on the top of the mob that you threw the beer on. At some point during the fight, I think the mob activates, so you can talk to them early before the other mob is dead, although we're melting this pretty quickly. And then he will activate as well, and you can cleave the 2 targets for a little bit. This is what just happened, right? So the Harbor King does this debuff on the tank that you see, which basically you need to keep an eye if the tank has a debuff. He's just taking increased damage, so you need to be able to heal them very quickly. And then the other mob does the yell, unyielding yell, which is a huge AoE if it goes off, so you need to make sure to interrupt them. Once you kill one of these, the other take the abilities that this mob has. So now we pulled King Bjornir, or whatever the name is, and they will do a throw, a dagger throw. You see one on my rogue right now, which is just a ticking dot that you also have to heal through. So once you have those 2 mobs going on, you basically have the debuff on the tank permanently, so you have to be careful because he's taking extra damage, and then there's going to be at least 1 person with the dot that you need to heal through as well. At the same time, of course, there are yells going on that need to be interrupted, and now there's a chance that both mobs could yell, so make sure that you're ready to help with interrupts if your melee misses one. And then once that mob is dead, the King Thor is active. The King Thor is probably the easiest of the mobs. He will just summon adds, very small adds, somewhere around us. They're going to start moving slowly towards him, and your goal is for them not to reach him. So right now, as you can see, there's one ad on the left-hand side of the screen, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cast my Earthbind Totem on him, so he's walking slower towards the boss, and you just deal with the rest of the mechanics, which basically all the mobs, the last mob will have all 4 mechanics, right? But he's not going to call them immediately one after the another, so it's pretty easy, right? As soon as you know what the mobs do, just be prepared to do a little bit of healing here or there, and cleave them as much as possible, so you get to the last boss faster. Alright, so make sure to drink, although this next boss is not very scary. Usually it's a free boss, as long as your tank does everything correctly. And just prepare mentally for Odyn, which is the last boss. He is a little bit harder, especially on higher keys. So they did reduce the amount of talking that this boss does before he gets active, which is great. You had to wait like 30 to 40 seconds before that. Now it's much quicker. And this boss is, it's not exactly tanking Spank, but it's very easy, right? So first, you just DPS him, and every now and then he's going to do the Fell Blaze Rush. So the whole idea here is make sure you're away from the people who's getting rushed, because you can get that debuff that my warrior just got, and it's a ticking dot, so you might actually get it on few people, and that would be unpleasant to heal. The other thing that happens is he does the Ragnarok, so when that happens, you need to get into the shield, which is basically casted by your tank. Usually the tank does that, so you need to get inside or you're dead. And then the boss is going to pick up the shield and cast it. You don't have to stay inside of it, right? But what the shield does is it blocks all the attacks from the front. So if you want to DPS the boss, you have to be behind him. But again, you don't have to stay in the shield for that second phase. You definitely need to go inside while he's casting Ragnarok. But if the boss is casting the shield, you can do whatever you would like. And the other thing that he does is, apart from the Fellblaze rushes, of course, is he's going to spawn those little elementals, green elementals, which leave the puddles on the ground. And basically you need to cleave them down. So here's the Ragnarok. Make sure to run in quickly towards your tank. Basically the only way you wipe here is that the tank doesn't cast the shield, right? That's how you die. There is a chance that one of the elementals actually spawns inside of the shield, so don't be afraid. Just cast your next to heal from the green stuff on the ground before the shield is actually over, and then move out, cleave down the mobs, etc. The other bad thing that could happen here is you get a charge, a Fellblaze rush to more than one person, right? Then you might have to do some extra healing as well, because you have the dot on more than one person. But other than that, it's actually pretty easy fight. If you get Fellblaze rushed, you can actually use a defensive. There's nothing to save it from, right? You need it on the last boss, but it will be up until that point. So if you do those few mechanics right, it's a tank and spank fight, which is great because technically you're not going to need cooldowns for this fight, right? If people play it correctly, all of your cooldowns should be up for the last boss, and this is something that you probably need anyway. Alright, and then we come to Odyn, which is the last boss. He has quite a few mechanics, and basically you want to save the lust for this boss, but you don't lust on Pooh here, you lust when you get the Valkyr phase, which I'll talk about in just a second. Now, when the boss starts, basically you want to stay on the edges of the room. And that stands true for all of your non-melee parts of the group, because he's going to target somebody and drop a big sword on top of them. And that swords are going to spit out basically little globes, little orbs. So here's the sword, and here are the globes. If you get hit by a globe, you get stunned. You want this to be outside of the middle of the room because you need that clear for a little bit later in the fight. He's also going to spawn an ad and do this big circle that you need to run out from. Now, this is a slow cast, but if you don't have a moving ability, make sure to start running very quickly, because if that hits you, you die. You still want to be on the edges, you want to interrupt the ad and cleave it down, and shortly after that, after he casts those second swords, run to the middle and get ready to run to a rune. So I got a green symbol on top of my head, so I need to find the green rune and run on top of it. After you do that, you get a 50% increased damage and healing for 25 seconds. This is where you want to lust, and this is where you want to burn the boss down, because there are, apart from thundering, there are no other mechanics going on. So, after the buff is over, you basically repeat the first phase, but keep in mind that the AoE that he does after he casts the swords does more damage based on the amount of swords that are active. So here, I Gust of Wind to get out. I'm trying to help interrupt the ad. Obviously dodge the orbs, which I didn't do, because if you get stunned in an unpleasant moment and you don't get your rune, you die. So as you can see here, we bait all the swords here, but after they cast the Shattered Spears, right, they do damage based on the amount of swords that are active. So this is actually something to be afraid of in the later phases of the fight, because there's more swords, so you're taking more damage, and basically surviving those hits where you have 6 swords rolling is the challenge on Tyrannical fights. Once you get the boss to 80%, he basically dies. And the other thing that I would recommend here is you probably saw the weak aura that I have for the runes. So when the runes happens, first you want to be in the middle of the room so you can get quickly to your designated rune, and then the weak aura basically shows you which rune you need to run to. It's very helpful because obviously without the weak aura, I was actually not being able to see very clearly the colors of the little circles on the ground that you need to run to. So from that perspective, I would definitely recommend you to get that weak aura. I'll link it into the description of this video, so it makes your runs easier, and there's other alternatives out there as well if you want to find something else that suits your playstyle better. So yeah, this last fight is basically positioning yourself correctly and then saving big cooldowns and defensives for when the 6 sword hits happen. You saw the breakdown of my healing, you saw my talents here, so if you have any questions, you can let me know in the comments below, and I will have more of these commentary videos coming up on the channel soon, so feel free to subscribe if you're interested into those. Alright, so thank you very much for watching, and happy healing. See you in the next one.